Across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Very good morning. Welcome to Bev Turner today on GB News. Now, do you think it's time that same-sex blessings should be allowed in church? Well, this morning, the General Synod of the Church of England, the people who decide such things, will debate the motion of same-sex marriage, a divisive idea which has been rumbling on for over 6 years now within the church. We're going to be going live outside to the Church of England's General Synod at the top of the show to find out why people are protesting the idea. And of course, we have a new Tory party chairman after yesterday and 4 new governmental departments at the cost of 100 million quid. Will these changes make any difference to your life? We're going to be touching upon all of those changes that happened yesterday throughout the show. And if you think your commute to work is a trial, try living on a road in Birmingham where fly tipping, burnt out cars and potholes are a regular occurrence. I'm sure we'll find some good news too. All of that after the latest headlines with Tatiana.
Bev, thank you. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. The President of Ukraine is arriving in the UK today in a surprise visit. It's his first visit to the country since the start of Russia's invasion. Volodymyr Zelensky will meet Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, as well as make an address to Parliament. He'll also visit Ukrainian troops training in Britain. It's as the Prime Minister announces a stepping up of aid to the country, including plans to train Ukrainian pilots. Mr. Sunak says the President's visit is a testament to the unbreakable friendship between the two countries. Governments and organisations around the world are offering support to Turkey and Syria after devastating earthquakes kill more than 9,600 people. 3 British nationals are still missing following the disaster. A 7.8 magnitude earthquake hit on Monday morning, with a second major quake a few hours later. The government has pledged support to Turkey's president, who's declared a state of emergency for 3 months in the 10 worst affected cities. A 77-strong British search and rescue team are currently assisting in the country. The new Conservative chairman has told GB News upcoming local elections would be a challenge for his party following a mini cabinet reshuffle yesterday. Greg Hands has replaced Nadeem Zahawi, who was sacked over his tax affairs. The government has also created 4 new departments with an aim to boost the economy and address the energy crisis. Grant Shapps will head up a new energy security and net zero department, which will focus on securing the UK's long-term energy supply. Mr. Han said the changes would help to build a platform for next year's general election.
Rishi has created couple of new government departments to bring a sharper focus to the government on things like energy security, on science and technology, and making sure his 5 priorities are seen through. I'm really looking forward to doing this job. You know, it's a fantastic opportunity to be chairman of the Conservative Party. Our main focus is going to be on making sure we've got everything in place to win next year's general election, to take on an unreformed Labour Party.
An independent school where a head teacher was found dead alongside her family will reportedly stay closed until after half-term. It's while Surrey police continue their investigation into a homicide. The bodies of Emma Patterson, her husband George and their daughter 7-year-old Letty were found in the grounds of Epsom College on Sunday. The force has said Mr. Patterson had been in contact with police about his gun licence only days before the incident. Firefighters are to announce a fresh strike action tomorrow if they fail to come to an agreement with bosses on pay today. Members of the Fire Brigades Union will be holding last-ditch talks with employers after overwhelmingly rejecting a 5% pay offer at the end of last year. The union says it hopes to resolve the dispute without a strike, and it's giving employers the chance to come forward with a better salary offer. Children who are victims of sexual abuse are waiting more than 600 days to see their attackers brought to justice. Figures released by the Centre of Expertise on Child Sexual Abuse found it took more than 200 days for police to decide whether to charge a suspect after a crime was reported. It says it then took another 353 days on average for the matter to be concluded in court. The CSA estimates around 500,000 children suffer sexual abuse each year, and they believe those cases are seriously underreported. The Church of England could move away from the 1,000-year-old tradition of referring to God as He in the future. It's after priests within the church asked to use gender-neutral terms instead. Religious leaders say a new project on gendered language will begin this spring, with any changes to be approved by the church's decision-making body synod. And Royal Mail have revealed the first and second class stamps that will feature a portrait of King Charles. The design draws inspiration from stamps that feature the late Queen Elizabeth. Royal Mail's director David Gold has described it as a defining part of the King's reign. The stamps go on sale from April. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Bev Turner today.
Very good morning. Welcome to Bev Turner today on GB News. Here's what's coming up this morning. There's a protest taking place right now outside the Church of England's General Synod on equal marriage rights. The demonstration calling for same-sex couples to be allowed to marry in church has been organised by the LGBT campaigner Peter Satchell. Do you think it's time that same-sex couples should be allowed to marry in the church? We'll be crossing over to the protest in just a moment. And the Prime Minister revealed his new cabinet yesterday, as well as creating 4 new departments to boost the economy and address the energy crisis, apparently. We'll be going over the new appointments with a fine-tooth comb this hour to see what difference, if any, the reshuffle will make to your life. And 2 of our most popular panellists, political commentator Emma Webb and former Labour MP Stephen Pound, will join me throughout the show to debate the biggest stories of the day, including the House of Lords overturning plans to clamp down on protest marches that caused too much disruption. As always, you are my third panellist. I love to hear from you. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet me at gbnews. So today, the General Synod of the Church of England will debate the motion of same-sex marriage. This follows the recent meeting of the College of the Bishops to recommend new services of blessings for same-sex couples. Our reporter, Ray Addison, has been finding out more and joins us from Westminster now. Good morning, Ray.
Yes, good morning, Bev. It's long been a very controversial issue, the state church refusing to conduct same-sex marriage ceremonies. Now, today the General Synod behind me will be debating a motion put forward by bishops to allow same-sex blessings. Joining me now is Jane Ozanne. She's a member of the General Synod. Jane, thanks for coming here. Now, you're tabling 2 amendments to this motion. What are they?
Well, the First Amendment actually asks for the apology that the bishops have given to be delayed until they actually do something that removes the discrimination and the cause of so much pain and harm to the LGBT community. We've had years of apologies. We've had, since I've been involved, 2016, we've had archbishops apologising for the pain and hurt, and yet it continues. So it's hollow. It only serves to make them try and feel bitter, but doesn't actually help the LGBT community at all. The Second Amendment, which arguably is perhaps the more meaty one, is calling for a debate in the summer about whether we can have equal marriage or not. We've been fudging these issues for far too long. Even these blessings that aren't really blessings, actually, they're just blessing the individuals. They're not blessing their union or their partnership. We need to get to the core of the problem, understand, can someone like myself have a sexual relationship with another woman in a committed, marriage? And is that something that God wants to bless and celebrate? And do people who believe that, are they Christian or aren't they? And it's that debate that we need to have, and I'm asking for that as an amendment this afternoon.
Now, I think many people in the Church of England would say, well, hold on, we're talking about allowing blessings. That is a step in the right direction. Why is that not far enough?
Because the discrimination continues. We're not equal, and we aren't clear as to whether that can be a real union or not. So much of this has been fudged, so much of the papers that we've received, and even the blessings themselves, one way by the Conservatives and another way by the Progressives. And to me, that's not holy, it's not godly, and I know it's not just. And, we've had years now of debating this, and we know that we're split. We know that there are 2 very different ways of looking at this, and the decision we have to make is our tent big enough? Are we prepared to accommodate a plurality of views, which is what's happened in other countries, it's what's happened up in Scotland, New Zealand, Canada, or are we going to stick to this very narrow understanding that only a small percentage of the church want? We've got research studies that show now that a majority of Anglicans around the country want same-sex marriage, but they're inhibited by doing that because the Synod won't make a decision.
What sort of impact do you feel that the Church of England's stance on same-sex marriage has had on the LGBT plus community and their relationship with people of faith who just happen to have different sexual orientations?
Well, so many of my LGBT friends are absolutely angry with the church. They've suffered quite painful rejection by their friends and their family. They believe God hates them. They believe the church judges them. And it's not just them, it's their friends and family too, who feel deeply upset that they cannot celebrate their love in church. And we see that in the latest census figures, where we can see that, people are leaving the church in their droves. They think the church is hypocritical, out of touch, and doesn't stand for the one thing that God is, which is a loving God who accepts us just as he has created us.
Now, there are other churches where same-sex couples could go and get married. Why is it important that the Church of England joins that list?
Well, personally, because it's my home. So many of us, we grew up in our churches. It's not a concept. It's a place where we meet with our friends and family. It's where we belong. And yet we, sadly, are made to feel second-class citizens. But the other bigger issue, actually, is that it's the established Church of England. It is the state official church that should serve everybody, but at the moment only serves the Lucky Jean Club who happen to be heterosexual. And I know Parliament particularly are very concerned about this now and are looking at the Synod to see whether it will become a place where all are welcome and all are served, or whether it's just a few.
You're making a speech later this afternoon. How are you expecting to be received?
Well, Synod is split, but from our calculations, I think we have 3 houses in Synod, the House of Laity, the House of Clergy and the House of Bishops. I think the lay and clergy members, the majority are probably behind me. The big question will be whether the bishops choose to be. But if the bishops choose to block progress, if they choose not to be the people who say no, I do think Parliament in particular will want to hold them to account, because they'll be seen as the ones who are stopping the will of the Anglican Church in England today.
Jane Ozanne, General Synod member, thank you very much. Now, we did approach the Church of England for a statement, and they sent me the following. They said the Church has begun to change. We've realised just how badly we've treated LGBTI plus people. Our eyes have been opened to the harm that we've done. That's a reality that must continue to change.
OK, thank you, Ray. Really interesting, isn't it? Let me know what you think. gbviews@gbnews.uk. You've already been getting in touch with me. Duncan has said the Church of England needs to cut any affiliation with the government. It's not religious, but it's unthinking that we should force any religion to change its belief. And on politics, I said we had these cabinet reshuffle yesterday, the creation of 4 new departments at a cost of 100 million quid to we taxpayers. We're going to be talking about those throughout the show. Sasha has said Mr Sunak can promise to heal the world, but in 12 months' time, these promises will mean nothing, because I'm afraid we will by then have a Labour government and new problems will develop and we will have more false promises and the circle of politics continue. Right, after the break, should MPs who lose their seats, there might be a few of those on the Conservative side, if the polls are anything to believe in the next election, should they get a £100,000 payoff? We're going to delve into that question after a short break.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office. Fog clearing across central and southern parts of the UK during the rest of the morning, and then dry for many into the afternoon, but it will turn increasingly wet and windy in the north. Now, you can see the contrast across the UK. High pressure close to the south, light winds and clear skies, allowing frost and fog to form by dawn this morning, but a weather front moving into northwest Scotland, bringing strengthening winds, gales, 65 to 75 mile per hour gusts for the Outer Hebrides, and some heavy rain for a time during the afternoon. As that's pushing south, it will push cloud into northern England, West Wales as well as Cornwall, but to the southeast, actually plenty of sunshine once the fog lifts, and temperatures fairly widely across the UK reaching 8 to 10 Celsius. Now, the front across Scotland pushes south through the evening, and it will fall as snow over the higher ground as it clears. Then wintry showers follow for northern Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland as well, snow and hail in places, mainly over the hills. The front weakens, though, as it pushes south. It will prevent a frost in the far south, with some drizzle to begin things on Thursday. Otherwise, for North Wales, Northern England, southern Scotland, frosty conditions and bright skies. But for Northern Ireland, as well as for much of the rest of Scotland, we've got those showers continuing to pile in. A gusty wind as well for the far north. The rain and the drizzle and the low cloud clears quite quickly during the morning in the south, and then sunny skies once again, 8 to 10 Celsius across much of England and Wales. Feeling colder, though, for Scotland and Northern Ireland, with those blustery showers moving through. The showers do tend to ease into Thursday evening. We'll see a lot of cloud arrive into the north and the west from the Atlantic, and that's the start of a milder episode of weather heading into the weekend. Mostly cloudy skies this weekend, but some brightness in the south, and temperatures rising for most.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you.
GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online. across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
This Saturday at 8 p.m, tune in to a GB News Investigates documentary as we tell the full story of the grooming gang scandal.
My childhood has been stolen.
We will expose the cover-ups that have kept this national scandal under wraps for decades.
Not one person has been held accountable.
Our investigation uncovers the true scale of this outrage.
I want to see senior officials held legally to account.
On GB News, grooming gangs, Britain's shame.
Very good morning. It is 10:19. You are watching and listening to Bev Turner today on GB News. Thanks for joining us. Now, my panel are here this morning. I am so pleased to be joined by Emma Webb, UK Director at the Common Sense Society. Morning, Emma. And former Labour MP Stephen Pound. Right, this story, Stephen, I can't wait to hear what you think about this as a former MP.
Yeah.
There is an idea, a suggestion, that when MPs lose their seats, this is a Commons Administration Committee, they've called for a special ceremony for the MP and their family where they are presented with a medal by the Commons Speaker for their time in office, because apparently losing their seat can be an emotional and traumatic experience, and the noble enterprise of public office should be defended, encouraged and recognised. I think we sort of agree with that bit, possibly. I'm not sure about the ceremony. But then, as a goodbye for having only had £84,000 a year as salary, they should get a £100,000 payoff to say, I'm ever so sorry you weren't good enough for your constituents to vote for you. There you go, there's 100 grand.
Well, I'm not entirely sure if this is going to be retrospective. That's my first thought. But the idea of getting a medallion... Well, obviously I do. I mean, at the end of the war, my dad got a number of medals, like virtually everybody. And the one medal that everybody got was just the active service medal, just as you got because you've been in active service.
Yeah.
The idea that we should actually get a medal, what for? For surviving, for being there. I mean, some of the greatest crooks and charlatans on God's green earth have been elected to Parliament.
Absolutely.
So rogues and rascals, and the idea of them queuing up, I won't mention the names, but I mean, I'm sure you can have them spinning around in your head.
Yeah.
And the speaker, but imagine if Burko had been the speaker at the time, and you've got some of the people in the expenses scandal. You've trousered God knows how much money. Here's a little gold medal. Here's a Quality Street gold toffee. No, it's embarrassing. If there's any, on a slightly serious note, if there's one major problem that Parliament has nowadays, it's the disconnect between Parliament and the people. Can you imagine the typical voter looking at it and saying, gosh, do you know, I've totally changed my view on Parliament because they're going to give them 100 bags of sand and a nice little medal to wear, and then you're going to wear it in the street outside?
But
Embarrassing.
Also, it's another one of those suggestions which completely neglects to factor in human behaviour, Emma Webb, because if you really do not like your MP and you don't want them to have a £100 bonus for losing, you're going to vote for them. It distorts the very notion of democracy.
Yeah. What's wrong with this picture?
You get rewarded for losing.
Yeah, completely. That's a really good point that I hadn't thought of. I mean, obviously, the whole thing is completely tone deaf, particularly under the current circumstances. I can't even believe that they have allowed this story to get into the press, because with all of the things that are going on at the moment, this is the last thing in the world that the public want to be hearing. I do think that there is a case for trying to attract a higher calibre of people into politics. But the point that has been made by James Roberts from the Taxpayers Alliance, and I think he absolutely nails it, he said that being elected to Parliament should be privilege enough.
Yeah.
And so, on the one hand, yes, you want to attract a higher calibre of people, because actually, in the grand scheme of things, £84,000 for some of the people who could go into politics is a much lower salary than they would be earning if they were, say, working in the private sector or working in finance or working in a bank or something. And those are the sort of people that we need to be encouraging to take part in public service. But on the other hand, you want people to do it because they believe in public service, that they believe that public service is a very important privilege in itself. And so the salary doesn't really matter to that. So you don't want people to be going into it because they have purely financial interest.
Well, but I don't think we should also be going. Speaking as an ex-sailor, hospital porter, and bus conductor, I think we have a bit of rough in Parliament as well. But what's interesting, Charles Walker, the chairman of Sir Charles Walker, he stood against me in 2001, and I have to say he tried to report me for buying ice creams for a group of kids on the Drayton Green estate. He thought I was treating. I doubled my majority.
Well done. But let me just think about this. So what is life like then as an MP, Stephen? You've got your £84,000 a year salary, but then you also get your property supplemented?
No, only very, very few people. Look, when I was first elected, I was the MP for Ealing North, which is about 40 minutes from Westminster. And yet, I could have claimed £23,000 a year for a second home. Indefensible. Now, this all came about because Margaret Thatcher, most problems actually go back to Margaret Thatcher in my experience.
Oh, I'd say Tony Blair, but never mind. We can agree to
Well, there's a read across there. But,
they're not that dissimilar, actually.
No, the thing is, MP's salary, back in the 70s and the 80s, should have increased. She didn't want the public opprobrium of increases, so she said, listen, expenses are the answer. We could claim £200 a month for flowers in our offices. We could also, even if we had a second home, we could still claim for a hotel without any supporting evidence. All of that got swept out, and to be fair, when Tony Blair found out, for example, that we didn't get speeding tickets as MPs, the chief constable had to approve if you got a ticket for speeding, which of course nobody, so he wiped all that out.
So the expenses got cleaned up, maybe leaving MPs, well, they're not out of pocket, 84 grand, and you can still claim quite a lot of expenses.
Well, the expenses are for your staff. That's the reality.
Which are generally wives and daughters and family members.
On occasion, that has been the case, yes. But look,
one of the reasons that they give as well for this is saying that because MPs feel that it's almost like a consolation prize because they feel they've been hounded out for because of a brutal, toxic political culture. Well, this was created by the politicians themselves, right?
Yes, and it is politics. And, I would love better people to go into politics. I often sit with people on this desk and I think, why aren't you in politics? Why aren't you a politician?
And sometimes you look at me and say, why were you in politics?
Yeah, why aren't you a politician?
I like to be able to speak freely on my own behalf, and I think within the Conservative Party, there's obviously a lot of pressure on people to not promote conservative views. But also, I think the idea of sort of being whipped into voting for certain things and to having to take a particular party line is unappealing to a lot of people who are free thinkers, which is a problem because you need political parties to attract free thinkers so that you can actually come up with ideas that are slightly outside of the box and not the sorts of things that we have been seeing time and time and time again.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody's within political parties never lasts very long.
So nobody's going to go into Parliament and say, I don't want to be an MP because it might be too horrible and toxic. There was that thing they found on Queen Elizabeth I's stagecoach where somebody had written, fain would I climb, yet fear I to fall. And somebody had written underneath, if thy heart faileth thee, climb not at all.
Well, where'd you get poetry like that, hey? Anyway.
On Queen Elizabeth I's stagecoach, written with a diamond.
On news channels on a Wednesday morning. Right, BBC public order bill. This is, Peers defeat plans to curb the protest disruption. This was announced late last night. So this public order bill that we've been talking about on and off, and it has this very controversial clause in there about serious public disorder, serious damage to property, serious disruption to the life of the community. If the protest might result in that, the police could restrict it. So what's happened, Emma? It went to the House of Lords and they've overturned quite a key part of it.
Yeah, I think the concern that has been aired by a lot of free speech advocates, including myself, is that whilst obviously some of these protests, like the Just Stop Oil protests, are a problem, and a lot of these people are doing things like committing criminal damage and putting people's lives at risk and so on, that was the reason why the government put forward some of these measures. But the concern has been, and I agree with this, and this is why I think this is good news, is that could very easily be misused to prevent protests, to prevent people from being able to air their views in a democratic, free society, is something that we all believe in. But another aspect of this, I think, is really important, is that a lot of the things that are really causing the serious disruption, things like Just Stop Oil, putting people's lives at risk on the roads, or vandalism. These are all things that can be dealt with within the law. There's this tendency to always want to create more legislation, and that always leads to trouble further down the line. So we don't need this legislation. We need the current law to be properly enforced, and for the police to not be taking cups of tea to protesters sitting in the middle of the road and then leaving it to the public to take matters into their own hands so that they can get to work or take their children to school.
Absolutely. What do you think, Steve?
Well, it's an interesting thing. The House of Lords, and there's about 1,000 of them there, and this vote was actually 254 to 240. So it's quite a tight vote. So I don't think it's particularly clear-cut. Look, the government want to throw some red meat to the Tories. But here's an odd thing. If you want to have a demonstration in London, you don't just turn up and march from Trafalgar Square. You have to get the approval of City Hall and the police. So we have this strange situation where if we have the poll tax demonstration, the fox hunting demonstration, things like that, you actually get approval for it. You get licence for the demonstration. But the thing about this is the Just Stop Oil people who've got a lot of time on their hands, they will come up with some ridiculous way around. But I think that something's got to be done. When you've got people slinging tomato soup, not at an Andy Warhol print, which is where you should be slinging it, but a Van Gogh. I mean, there's something wrong there. I think we've got to somehow balance it. I mean, I hate to sound sort of sensible about this, but in some ways, the right to protest, by all means, but let's not allow the M25 to be brought to a halt and people stop going to work. And also about Charlotte Lynch, the reporter, who was actually arrested by the police on the M25. Arrested. If you're going to actually stop the press reporting these things, then you're on a slippery slope to a dictatorship. One of the first things dictators do is close down the state broadcaster and take you out and shoot you.
Yeah. And I think for me, Emma, as well, this story just shows it's one of those stories that, wow, we do need the House of Lords. They do hold these bills to account in a way that Parliament doesn't.
Absolutely, and I think there's a very good case against this idea of having an elected House of Lords, because you do need the checks and balances. You can't just have a second House second House of Commons. That would completely undermine the entire point of having a second House. So the House of Lords have done brilliantly on this, and I think that there will be a lot of free speech advocates who are celebrating today. And I as I very often do, I agree with Stephen, and I think that...
Resign.
I do think that a lot of this stuff, like the use of protests to justify criminality, to justify vandalism, as we saw with the Edward Colston statue being pulled down, or throwing things at, tins of soup at paintings and so on, that's something that doesn't require this legislation. We need to be very, very careful in the sorts of legislation that's being proposed right now, including the online safety bill, that those with good intentions are not accidentally paving the road to hell by introducing things that could have serious anti-democratic and anti-free speech implications.
Absolutely. Right, brilliantly summed up, guys. OK, now, moving on after the break. A new Tory party chairman, 4 new governmental departments and allegations of bullying still looming over one prominent figure in the Conservative Party. The one man who can make sense of it all joins me in the studio after your morning's news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Bev, thank you. It's 10:31. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. The president of Ukraine has landed in the UK. It's his first visit to the country since the start of Russia's invasion. Volodymyr Zelensky will meet Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, as well as making an address to Parliament. King Charles is also set to hold an audience with President Zelensky today. It's as the Prime Minister, Mr Sunak, announces a stepping up of aid to the country, including plans to train Ukrainian pilots. Mr Sunak says the President's visit is a testament to the unbreakable friendship between the two countries. Governments and organisations around the world are offering support to Turkey and Syria after devastating earthquakes kill more than 9,600 people. 3 British nationals are still missing following the disaster. A 7.8 magnitude earthquake hit on Monday morning, with a second major quake a few hours later. The government has pledged support to Turkey's president, who's declared a state of emergency for 3 months in the 10 worst affected cities. A 77-strong British search and rescue team are currently assisting the country. An independent school where a head teacher was found dead with her family will reportedly stay closed until after half-term. It's while Surrey police continue their investigation into a homicide. The bodies of Emma Patterson, her husband George and their daughter Letty were found in the grounds of Epsom College on Sunday. The force has said Mr Patterson had been in contact with police about his gun licence only days before the incident. Royal Mail have revealed the first and second class stamps that will feature a portrait of King Charles. The design draws inspiration from stamps that featured the late Queen Elizabeth. Royal Mail's director David Gold has described it as a defining part of the King's reign. The stamps go on sale from April. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back. Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Dubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Very good morning. It's 10:35. This is Bev Turner Today on GB News. Now, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is in the UK for the first time since the invasion of Ukraine. Our political correspondent Tom Harwood is with me here in the studio. Good morning, Tom. Lots to talk about today. So Zelensky arriving, did anybody know that this was going to happen? It seems to have come a little bit out of the blue.
It has been kept very well under wraps, in a similar vein to how the Americans handled this for Zelensky's first visit outside of his country since the Russian full-scale invasion of his country a year ago. This has clearly been a very well-prepared operation, kept very, very tightly within a small group of people for the obvious security element to it. But also, there's a bit of a comparison that we can draw with regard to how the European Union has been handling a potential visit by Zelensky. This bubbled up into the press on Monday. The European People's Party Federalist group within the Parliament tweeted out, "We're looking forward to welcoming Zelensky to the Parliament." Clearly, it had not been handled well there, but they were expecting him to visit on Thursday. That did create a little bit of speculation. If he's travelling outside of Ukraine, where might he come to? But there wasn't any firm expectation that he would come to the UK, and it's significant that this is his second visit. US first, UK second, EU clearly third on the list.
What's he going to do while he's here, Tom? Do we know?
It's a busy itinerary. First of all, he's meeting the Prime Minister at Downing Street. Then he'll be addressing both Houses of Parliament in Westminster Hall. This is one of these big addresses that we've come to expect from foreign leaders. President Obama did so, Angela Merkel did so, Nelson Mandela did so, some of these big figures throughout history. It's always a big state occasion. And of course, most recently, Westminster Hall has been known about as the place where the Queen lay in state as hundreds of thousands of people filed past. It's a really significant part of Parliament, the oldest part of Parliament, 1,000 years old, that hall. But then Zelensky will be meeting with the King at Buckingham Palace. for an address, a visit. And after that, he'll be going to see some of the Ukrainian troops that are being trained by the British military. The British military has been training Ukrainian troops since 2014, since that partial invasion of Ukraine by Russia and the annexation of Crimea. And that training by British troops is one of the reasons why the Ukrainians have been able to so successfully repel a larger and better equipped Russian army in recent months. It's a fascinating position, and also we're expecting Rishi Sunak to announce today the UK is going to expand our training of Ukrainian troops, not just those on the ground, but also at sea and in air as well. That's the expansion that we're expecting.
And he has a bit of a selling job, I think, to do, Zelensky, in terms of generating more money from the UK to support the war. I think as the public appetite, perhaps, for more taxpayers' money to go out there possibly wanes a little bit. Well,
this is the worry that Boris Johnson had been talking about. Of course, the former Prime Minister has coined the term Ukraine fatigue. And the message that Boris Johnson, sort of outside of the structures of government, had been taking to the US in recent weeks was that actually the way to save taxpayers' cash, the way to seal this, is to get this done and wrapped up as fast as possible. If the Ukraine war can last for as short a time as possible, we can return to some sort of normality. Perhaps energy prices could come down. We could all save money in the long run. And I think that that's a similar message that we'll be hearing from Zelensky as well, that to get Ukraine done, to coin a phrase, to get this war over sooner rather than later, might actually be a way of saving money rather than spending a little bit now, but that continuing on for many, many years to come.
Yeah, while risking an escalation that nobody would want. Right, Rishi's reshuffle. You have to have your teeth in to say that, Tom. What's the fallout been since yesterday? No major kind of massive headline changes, were there? Greg Hands is a big appointment.
Greg Hands is a big appointment, filling a gap left, of course, by the firing of Nadeem Zahawi. But crucially, there wasn't any other person who left the cabinet table yesterday. We saw a new face in Lucy Fraser becoming the new DCMS secretary. That cabinet table has grown even larger. More people sitting around it than we have seen in a long time. And to some extent, that can point to some weakness of the Prime Minister's position. He wasn't able to fire anyone extra. In fact, he's just welcoming more people in. That might point to a bit of a lack of political capital there. But the important thing, I think, here isn't the faces around the cabinet table. It's the departments at which they are in command. And that we have seen a significant restructuring. Firstly, a dedicated energy department for the first time in a long time in this country. Going back to 2007 was the last time, really, we had a dedicated energy department. And that is talking about getting these big nuclear projects underway, the new wind and solar as well, and driving towards net zero. Energy security and net zero is the name of the department. ESNES in Whitehall speak is how it will be known.
It's when I heard the energy security and net zero, there was something. Why does that jar a little? Has that received any sort of criticism? It reminded me a bit of when Public Health England became the UK Health and Security Agency during the pandemic. It just sort of happened, and it felt a little bit. I don't know, like they weren't telling us everything. Why was our health suddenly a part of the security agency? And I think this maybe, is there a conflict? It tells us that our energy security is green all the way. Up to 2030, I guess.
Well, there has been some political criticism of this. The Reform Party put out a video yesterday saying that it's a contradiction to say that net zero and energy security could go together. These are contradictions. However, the former Levelling Up Secretary, Simon Clarke, hit back at that suggestion, saying that actually the way to get to energy security is to deliver net zero, because we've seen how volatile the price of natural gas is, for example, whereas if we had a greater nuclear capacity or a greater wind and solar capacity, we would be able to ride through some of these international market crises in a better way. I suppose whatever angle you come at it, more domestic supply, no matter how that energy is generated, will be the name of the game.
And maybe they can do something, if it's in one department, about green energy prices being linked to fossil fuel energy prices, which seems insane to me. But anyway, Of course, it's Rishi Sunak. There's going to be a lot of tech in there, the ultimate technocrat. And he's brought in this new department, hasn't he, for innovation, technology, whatever. It doesn't have digital in the title, though, does it?
It doesn't. It has science in the title, though.
And we know
DSIT, as it's known. And no, not maths in the title quite yet. But this actually reminds me a lot of a department that used to exist under Gordon Brown, which had science and universities and all that sort of stuff gobbled in together. And we're seeing that as a specific strain from Rishi Sunak today, someone who is often spoken about as very technocratic as a leader, someone who does care about sort of science, innovation and technology. Very important to get that SIT the right way around. Some people were suggesting it could be science, technology and innovation STI yesterday, which would not have been a good name for a department. Really, really crucial in these reshuffles to get how these are known. Quite clearly. But yes, this is what Rishi Sunak's mission as Prime Minister is doing, delivering growth through these sort of technical means. He spoke about this in his New Year's speech, and I think we're going to be seeing a lot more from DSIT about how growth is going to grow through what the Chancellor and the Prime Minister describe as a new Silicon Valley. We've got to move on, Tom. I could talk to you all day, but there was very little in there for the arts with his reshuffling. It tells you about his priorities again, doesn't it? Yeah, the wings of DCMS have been clipped. The big bits of DCMS, the digital bits, have moved with Michelle Donnellan, who is now in charge of DSIT. And DCMS has a new face around the cabinet table, but it's a rather smaller department than it was before.
OK, thanks, Tom. Now, what kind of condition is your street in? Well, one road in Birmingham might just be the worst in Britain when it comes to fly tipping. Burnt-out cars and potholes. Crawford Street in the Saltley area of the city has it all. We sent our West Midlands reporter, Jack Carson, to take a look.
You might be mistaken for thinking this road is the set of a new blockbuster apocalypse film, but this is Crawford Street in Birmingham. Plagued by cars left stripped in the street, potholes and fly tipping, this might be the most neglected street in the country. It's only 0.2 miles in length, but drivers using this cut-through have to battle with the conditions. Jerry Moynihan is a community activist and has been documenting the condition of the area before reporting his findings to the council.
Now, since 2018, I've been in contact with the council about trying to get the fly tipping removed, the abandoned cars, the cars that are burnt out. This is a place where people continuously come to dump their rubbish. As the local businesses confirm, there are frequent fires here. Now, when the fly tipping goes up in flames, the local fire service has to come out. That's a minimum of £500 per time. It's not just the cost of clearing it, it's the cost of not clearing the fly tipping, because some other service, such as the fire service, has to come out and it's a cost to them.
The amount of fly tipping is an issue for businesses based on the road too. Tahir Hussain works at a salvage yard.
They've been fly tipping on this road. It's been over 7 years, 10 years. I've been here for 15 years, but this has been going for a long time. And Birmingham City Council are doing nothing at all to help with that. We pay our rates on time, but the thing is, we see a state of this road. You're talking about every week we email them, but they're not coming back to us at all.
Last year, a man who dumped business waste on the street was ordered to pay more than £1,400 after a successful court prosecution by Birmingham City Council. But Jerry Moynihan stresses this problem engulfs the inner city.
I think, unfortunately, this is an inner city area. It's an area of deprivation. I don't think the council are inclined to do anything. As you've seen with the just short distance from here, the local youth playground area, it's fly tipped. It's been blocked off. I think the area is just generally being neglected.
In response to the issues on Crawford Street, a Birmingham City Council spokesperson said, "We are working hard to improve the condition of the city's roads and carry out regular inspections. We aim to clear fly tipping within 2 working days, but white goods can take up to 14. If we have evidence, we will prosecute." For now, this road remains a hotspot for waste, and the local campaign for due and proper clearance continues. Jack Carson, GB News, Birmingham.
Thank you, Jack. Send me some pictures of your street, won't you, if they compare to that. It's extraordinary, isn't it? Now, let me introduce you to my panel again this morning. I am delighted they haven't left the building. Emma Webb, UK Director at the Common Sense Society, and former Labour MP Stephen Pound. Right, this is a belter of a story.
Oh, God.
Right. Should You know when you go to church and they say, Our Father, him, he... Hang on, you can tell how often I go to church. What do we say? The God, the Father, the Holy Son...
The Father, the Son, and the...
Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Thank you, that's what I was looking for.
Our Father who art in heaven.
Our Father who art in heaven. So there is a question proposed that perhaps in order to make the church, the Christian church, more modern, we should have gender-neutral language when it comes to all these men depicted by the Bible, Emma Webb.
I've had enough of this. I've just, honestly, I've had it up to here with the Church of England and their nonsense. It's only a couple of days ago they were suggesting human composting instead of cremation so that they can reach their net zero targets. They've basically turned into an exceptionally woke corporate. They are woker than woke on so many things. And this is ultimately disrespectful. And it's not surprising because the church leadership has been repeatedly disrespectful to its own traditions, to its liturgy, to the scriptures, and to, you know, all the fundamental theological tenets and sacraments of the Christian church and Christian tradition. But on this, what they're suggesting is that the Liturgical Commission should take steps to include or to create more inclusive language within the liturgy. And so we would end up with this absurd situation where the Lord's Prayer, which was given to the church by Christ in, you know, when Christians in church pray this prayer, it's the words that our Lord has told us to speak. And the language of the Bible in its original is, of course, gendered. And so now we would be in this absurd situation where it's rather than saying our Father who art in heaven, we'd have to say our non-gendered parent. Or and
I don't think they've said what they would replace it with specifically, have they? But let me play devil's advocate here, rather appropriate in this conversation.
Entirely inappropriate, actually.
Well, yeah, probably, that's me. One of the reasons that I think one of the many reasons I'd say, but that I could never feel like I was raised as sort of Church of England upbringing, church ministry, but one of the reasons why I couldn't, I think, identify with a church is because women don't do terribly well in the Bible. Like, Emma, you know a lot more than the Bible than I do. But women tend to be, you know, the virgin or the whore, right? In the Bible, there is a very clear stereotyping of women. Perhaps, one might say, Stephen Pound, the Bible, in order to not have fewer Christian people in this country, does need to move with the times, to be more gender inclusive. As I'm saying it, I'm not believing it myself.
Well, look, I mean, in many ways...
I'm trying, Emma, I'm trying.
I'm sorry, the Blessed Virgin Mary is one of the most important people in the Bible, most important people in the history of the world. Yeah. And we have Naomi, we have Ruth, we have Mary Magdalene, we have Mary of Magdala. There's plenty of other people in there. So, but look, I think the problem with this is, I mean, I don't know what the Pope's going to say because il Papa, you know, what on earth would the Pope then be? I think this is such nonsense, but there is one little smidgen of sanity in here. Some of the language we used to use the word men to describe men and women. We used to say, for example, in the Creed, in the Catholic Church, we say, for us men and for our salvation. Quite often we now say, for us people and for our salvation. I think that's perfectly acceptable.
Yeah.
But to tie yourself into agonising knots, and as for the human composting, I have a sign outside my allotment that says trespassers will be composted.
Brilliant. Well, I mean, look, it's a story about language, of course it is. And there is an argument, I've said it before on the show, that language has to change and evolve to reflect our reality. And if, Emma, people are put off by the Christian church and the Bible because it kind of sowed the seeds of patriarchy, maybe we should be making it a little more gendered.
I think that one of the things that is putting people off the church is the fact that they can't stick to their own principles. They don't seem to really believe in anything, and that turns people away. They have this belief that if they make themselves more secular, that will get more bums on seats or bums on pews. And to answer to your point about women in the Bible, I think Stephen, you know, nailed it. The women play a very important role in the Bible. The Virgin Mary is the most important woman in history as far as the Bible is concerned. And the way that it portrays the whores, Mary Magdalene, it actually gives her an incredibly elevated status. So in the context of its time, it's very revolutionary in that respect. So you know, I think that the way that women are portrayed in the Bible doesn't in any way entrench patriarchy or anything like that. I don't think that there's anything inherently toxic about traditional gender roles. And I think that this is a postmodernist butchering of language. And you said that language has to adapt to change with the times, but language shouldn't adapt to cease to reflect the truth or reality. And that's what we're seeing right now. We're seeing that particularly in the gender debate.
Well, the church are going to launch a major project on gendered language this spring, so this won't be the last you've heard about it. Let me know what you think. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Right, we are now talking about, this was sentencing yesterday of the Met Police rapist David Carrick. He was given 36 life sentences at Southwark Crown Court yesterday. He was told he would not be eligible for parole for 30 years, by which point he'd be 78. Is it a strict enough sentence, Stephen, because it's being called into review?
It'll never be strict enough because it'll never, ever bring peace and closure to his victims because his crimes were so utterly reprehensible. Watching Mrs. Justice Chima Grubb read out the indictment yesterday, you just suddenly realise this person is beyond depraved. But if it's any consolation, I mean, I know what'll happen to him in prison. He'll be in what's called the VPU, the Vulnerable Prisoner Unit, which is where you put paedophiles and police officers. He will have a very, very rough time. There'll be ground glass in the porridge, unless I'm very much mistaken. But the fact remains is, I think we should move the spotlight away from Carrick and onto his victims, because how on earth are they going to actually rebuild their lives? Because he wasn't just a rapist, he was a coercive, controlling, brutal rapist. And the things he did to those women, it's just almost beyond belief. He's a man who almost makes me think maybe there's a case for capital punishment. I don't believe that is, because I think ultimately as a Christian, anybody's capable of redemption. But in his case, it's going to be a damned hard job.
Yeah. Well, what do you think, Emma? Should he have had a stricter sentence? As Stephen said, he's going to have a miserable time in prison.
Yeah, I think, I mean, the point has been made that this has already undermined trust in the police. Yeah. That the lower sentence could undermine trust in the justice system as well. And now I don't think that political consideration should come into play when it comes to people's sentences, because I think that's actually quite dangerous to the course of justice. But obviously this guy should have received a higher sentence, and I think he will, because this is obviously going to be referred to the Court of Appeal. And according to the report on this, in the Court of Appeal, 70% of sentences get increased. So it's very likely that it will. You can just imagine being one of his victims and knowing that at some point in the not too distant future that this man is going to be out free roaming amongst the public, that compounds the trauma of the whole situation. So I think the government back in 2020, they dropped this practice of letting violent criminals out of jail halfway through their sentence, which was an absurd thing to begin with, in my opinion. So I think that we do go too light on sentencing generally. Of course, he should receive a longer sentence than this. It's just not fair on the victims that they have to look forward to him being let out.
Yeah. Right, we've come to the end of our first hour. That went quickly, didn't it? Now, Conservative MP Michael Fabricant will be in the studio just after this break with his take on the strength of his own party after Rishi Sunak's reshuffle and his thoughts on President Zelensky's visit, which is happening as we speak. But first of all, here's your weather.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office. Fog clearing across central and southern parts of the UK during the rest of the morning, and then dry for many into the afternoon, but it will turn increasingly wet and windy in the north. Now, you can see the contrast across the UK. High pressure close to the south, light winds and clear skies, allowing frost and fog to form by dawn this morning, but a weather front moving into northwest Scotland, bringing strengthening winds, gales, 65 to 75 mile per hour gusts for the Outer Hebrides, and some heavy rain for a time during the afternoon. As that's pushing south, it will push cloud into northern England, West Wales as well as Cornwall, but to the southeast, actually plenty of sunshine once the fog lifts, and temperatures fairly widely across the UK reaching 8 to 10 Celsius. Now the front across Scotland pushes south through the evening, and it will fall as snow over the higher ground as it clears. Then wintry showers follow for northern Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland as well, snow and hail in places mainly over the hills. The front weakens though as it pushes south. It will prevent a frost in the far south with some drizzle to begin things on Thursday. Otherwise, for North Wales, Northern England, Southern Scotland, frosty conditions and bright skies. But for Northern Ireland, as well as for much of the rest of Scotland, we've got those showers continuing to pile in. A gusty wind as well for the far north. The rain and the drizzle and the low cloud clears quite quickly during the morning in the south, and then sunny skies once again, 8 to 10 Celsius across much of England and Wales. Feeling colder though for Scotland and Northern Ireland, with those blustery showers moving through. The showers do tend to ease into Thursday evening. We'll see a lot of cloud arrive into the north and the west from the Atlantic. And that's the start of a milder episode of weather heading into the weekend. Mostly cloudy skies this weekend, but some brightness in the south and temperatures rising for most.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236,
And YouView, Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very good morning. Welcome back to Bev Turner today on GB News. Before midday, we're going to be looking into Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's surprise visit to the UK this morning. He's already met the Prime Minister. He's scheduled to visit King Charles later on. He'll also give a speech to Parliament this afternoon. And also, as the Church of England debates the idea that's been dividing the religious community for years, I'm asking, should same-sex marriages be allowed to go ahead in our Christian church? Also, the disgraced rapist Met Police Officer David Carrick's sentencing is being reviewed after the Attorney General received multiple requests of it being too lenient. Do you agree? We're going to go into all the details of that. But first of all, here's a look at the latest news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Bev, thank you. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. The President of Ukraine has landed in the UK in his first visit to the country since the start of Russia's invasion. Volodymyr Zelensky, who's been greeted by the Prime Minister, will make an address to Parliament as part of his surprise visit. King Charles is also set to hold an audience with Zelensky at Buckingham Palace this afternoon. It's as Rishi Sunak has announced a stepping up of aid to Ukraine, including plans to train Ukrainian pilots. He says the president's visit is a testament to the unbreakable friendship between the two countries. Governments and organisations around the world are offering support to Turkey and Syria after devastating earthquakes killed more than 11,000 people. 3 British nationals are still missing following the disaster. A 7.8 magnitude earthquake hit on Monday morning with a second major quake a few hours later. The government has pledged support to Turkey's president, who's declared a state of emergency for 3 months in the 10 worst affected cities. A 77-strong British search and rescue team are assisting in the country. The new Conservative chairman has told GB News upcoming local elections would be a challenge for his party following a mini cabinet reshuffle yesterday. Greg Hands has replaced Nadeem Zahawi, who was sacked over his tax affairs. The government has also created 4 new departments with an aim to boost the economy and address the energy crisis. Grant Shapps will head up a new energy security and net zero department, which will focus on securing the UK's long-term energy supply. Mr Hands said the changes would help to build a platform for next year's general election.
Rishi has created a couple of new government departments to bring a sharper focus to the government on things like energy security, on science and technology, and making sure his 5 priorities are seen through. I'm really looking forward to doing this job. You know, it's a fantastic opportunity to be chairman of the Conservative Party. Our main focus is going to be on making sure we've got everything in place to win next year's general election, to take on an unreformed Labour Party.
The Supreme Court has rejected a challenge over the post-Brexit Northern Ireland Protocol trading arrangements. A dispute was brought by unionists and Brexiteers to the UK's highest court in the land, questioning the legality of the arrangement. They argued the protocol breaches the Acts of Union and the Northern Ireland Act. But the Supreme Court unanimously rejected their appeal. An independent school where a head teacher was found dead with her family will reportedly stay closed until after half-term. It's while Surrey police continue their investigation into a homicide. The bodies of Emma Patterson, her husband George, and their daughter Letty were found in the grounds of Epsom College on Sunday. The force has said Mr Patterson had been in contact with police about his gun licence only days before the incident. Firefighters are set to announce fresh strike action tomorrow if they fail to come to an agreement with bosses on pay today. Members of the Fire Brigades Union will be holding last-minute talks with employers after overwhelmingly rejecting a 5% pay offer in November last year. The union says it hopes to resolve the dispute without a strike and is giving employers the chance to come forward with a better salary offer. The Church of England could move away from the 1,000-year-old tradition of referring to God as he in future. It's after priests within the church asked to use gender-neutral terms instead. Religious leaders say a new project on gendered language will begin this spring, with any changes to be approved by the church's decision-making body, Synod. And Royal Mail have revealed the first and second class stamps that will feature a portrait of King Charles. The design draws inspiration from stamps that featured the late Queen Elizabeth. Royal Mail's director, David Gold, has described it as a defining part of the King's reign. The stamps go on sale from April. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Bev.
Good morning, welcome back to Bev Turner Today on GB News. Thanks for watching. Here's what's coming up for the rest of this hour. There's been an ambitious shake-up of Rishi Sunak's cabinet as the Prime Minister merges UK trade and business and creates departments for energy security and net zero. But will this be enough to save the Conservatives? We'll find out in just a moment. And the disgraced police officer David Carrick's 30-year sentence will be reviewed by the Attorney General after multiple requests to review what's been termed too lenient a sentence. I'm going to be speaking to a former detective chief superintendent of the Met Police later in the hour. And the political commentator Emma Webb and former Labour MP Stephen Pound will be back in the studio to join me for another round of talks about some of the biggest stories of the day. And of course, you are my third panellist. Do get in touch. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet me at gbnews to have your say. So, So, Volodymyr Zelensky jetted into the UK today. He's already met the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, and later on today he's going to be meeting King Charles. He's going to give a speech to Parliament this afternoon as Ukraine prepares to mark 1 year since Russia's invasion. Oh, yeah, that's been 1 year. Joining me for more is GB News' political editor, Darren McCaffrey. Good morning, Darren.
Yeah, very good morning, Bev. As you say, President Zelensky touched down here in the UK within the last hour or so. He was met on the tarmac by the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak in a literal embrace. Downing Street tweeting out a picture in the last couple of minutes of that meeting. And my word, that picture speaks 1,000 words in terms of the symbolism, I think, that the UK government is trying to drive home today. This is only the second visit that Volodymyr Zelensky has made outside of Ukraine since the invasion. As you say, essentially a year ago. He met with President Biden in the White House a couple of months ago. But it is notable that this is the first European country that President Zelensky will have visited. And it is going to be a jam-packed day. He's expected to arrive here in Downing Street. We think probably in the next 30 minutes or so. He's going to have a meeting, in fact, probably quicker than that, I reckon. They're heading back from the airport as we speak. They're going to have a brief meeting inside Number 10. He's then going to travel to Parliament with the Prime Minister. We're expecting President Zelensky to address MPs a little later on. Then a visit to Buckingham Palace to see His Majesty the King. And then later on, he's going to visit Ukrainian troops and British troops as they're being trained elsewhere in the country. So a really quite a busy day, and a day that goes beyond symbolism in many regards, Bev. And the reason I say that is because alongside this visit, Downing Street have announced something quite significant in terms of the commitment to Ukraine militarily. So we know that they're going to now include the training of Ukrainian troops in fighter jets. Now, this is obviously and has been quite controversial to date. No European country has been prepared to lend Ukraine fighter jets, even though there's an argument from Kyiv that is vital in order to provide greater security, to have air cover. Now, the UK is not going as far as saying that they're going to provide jets, but what they have said is they're prepared to start the training exercises on NATO standard aircrafts. So it's kind of looking down potentially into the future, where if jets were provided, the pilots would already have the training. That's quite a significant move. And in addition to that, the UK is going to provide Ukraine with longer range weapons as well, in a bid, Downing Street say, to disrupt Russia's ability to target civilian and critical national infrastructure. Again, there's been concern about longer range missiles and the possibility of escalating this war. But Volodymyr Zelensky's not just coming here for a photo opportunity. He's clearly secured quite big commitments, I would say, from the UK. But this trip is also about symbolism. And it will be quite a moment seeing President Zelensky on the street, as I say, in the next couple of minutes. And also just an added note to that about Prime Minister's Question Time, which is still going to take place at 12 noon today. I suspect it's going to disrupt the entire kind of atmosphere in that chamber, in the sense I'm not entirely sure Keir Starmer's going to ask about lots of the party political stuff at the moment. There will be a real essence that I think that all MPs, including the Labour opposition, will want to show their solidarity with Ukraine.
OK, thank you so much, Darren. Darren McCaffrey there down at Downing Street. Joining me now to discuss this is Conservative MP for Lichfield, Michael Fabricant. Good morning, Michael. Lovely to see you. I was a little bit surprised to hear that we're going to train Ukrainian fighters to fly fighter jets. That's surely got to be a step towards us.
It's a major step forward, and we're doing Marines as well. So, in other words, what we're saying, and by the way, notice I'm wearing my Ukrainian tie. I'll be there cheering on Volodymyr Zelensky, to pronounce his name precisely. Yes, it's a major change, because previously we were talking about only training the army. That's all countries doing that. And once again, Britain is leading the way, because we were the first, as you know, to provide anti-tank weapons, which stopped the Russian army from taking control of Kyiv, the capital. We were the first people to provide battle tanks, and now we're the first people to provide air training too.
Well, does that mean we're the first people to go and give a lot of taxpayers' money to a war that people are getting quite tired of?
Well, you know what? People probably said that in 1938 when Hitler marched into Czechoslovakia And the Prime Minister at the time said, well, so what? This is a little country of which we know little about. It doesn't matter. 1 year later, we were at war. Look, you cannot appease aggressors, and it's quite clear that Putin is deranged, and it's quite clear that Putin, if he were to invade Ukraine successfully, and he has been stopped so far, it would lead on to other things, because he thinks that Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia, which are NATO countries, should also be a part of Greater Russia.
I don't want to sit here as though I'm defending Putin, but I think we have to be very careful, and I think the British public at the moment feel that the way that Zelensky has been deified, when he was roundly recognised as being in one of the most corrupt governments in Europe before Russia invaded. There had always been skirmishes on the border with Russia for at least, we're getting on to 9 years now, before it escalated. Do we have serious questions to ask, though, about the continuation, the funding of this? Putin has been very clear from the beginning that all he really wanted was Ukraine to go back into his very sentimentalised vision of the former Soviet Union. We haven't heard him say he wished that he could extend strikes and the territorial ownership of other European countries.
Yes, Putin has said that. Putin has said that. I mean, at the moment, he is leaving Belarus alone because the government there is very pro-Kremlin.
Yeah.
But he has talked about the Baltic states, and he has talked about the restoration, not of the Soviet Union, because that was a Communist People's Republic, but talking about having the same territorial borders as the Soviet Union. No, the man is deranged. And as for Volodymyr Zelensky, look, he is fighting corruption now. He knows that if he's going to ever join the European Union, if he's ever going to join NATO, he's got to be a Western democracy.
Talking of corruption. Right, let's talk about issues.
Yes.
Let's talk about
They
issues.
probably feel at home.
Quite. Let's talk about issues closer to home, Michael. The reshuffle yesterday, what are your takeouts from the changes?
Well, if the changes were made, and I don't think they were, but if the changes were made to try and attract more voters, then we're whistling into the sky. It's not going to achieve that. People aren't interested in that. We've been in government for 12 years. When we have the general election, it'll probably be 13 or 14 years. And people are thinking, you know what? The government is boring. Let's have a change. Let's go for another boring government led by an even more boring leader, Keir Starmer. What the people want is delivery. Now, we've had some good economic news today, which is that Britain is unlikely this year to go into recession. Remember, Germany and most other EU countries are in recession, so that's not going to happen. But people want to feel good. They want to feel that this country has a vision. Now, Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt gave great speeches, but people aren't listening anymore because they're not interested in speeches. What they're interested in is action that produces results. So my own view is, if this reshuffle, it's not just a reshuffle, it's actually changing government departments.
Yeah, that's the most significant part of the change,
much more significant than the actual reshuffle. If that actually achieves the action that we want, which means that we become independent of other countries for our energy supplies and so on and so forth, and more importantly, that people have hope and have money in their pocket, if that happens, then that's a good thing. And, you know, I think that's what people want to see. So it's a small step in that direction.
We've talked a lot on this channel and on this show about the difference between Liz Truss's economic plan, as it was, and Rishi Sunak's. There is, repeatedly, we hear on the show, we see our viewers emailing in to say that they want something which is more pro-growth. Deregulation, the Liz Truss image, the Liz Truss vision of a true conservative, competitive-led free market economy, and they don't feel that Rishi Sunak is Jeremy Hunt is providing that.
Well, I see that and I get that. And what I've said to Jeremy Hunt is, look, one of the problems I think in all parliaments, and particularly in this parliament, is that you get swings and never get any happy medium. What I mean by that is that Liz Truss on the pendulum was way over here. And I fear that Jeremy Hunt's going to go way over there. Now, there is actually a happy medium. The growth agenda is important. And in fact, Rishi talked about it. But again, it's no good talking about it. He's got to deliver. And if we're going to get growth, it does mean reducing taxes. Now, it might not mean going as far as Liz Truss went, but it means going in that direction. and a steady-as-you-go policy, and I don't know what's in the budget, I'm not even sure that Jeremy knows yet, because it all depends on what OBR and other forecasts are. But if we just say we're going to be steady as you go, we're going to be steadily heading to a Labour government. And you know what? We might even deserve it if we're not adventurous.
Do you think people in the Conservative Party feel that you've got one foot out of the door? There's a sense, I have to say, my own personal opinion is that Rishi Sunak often looks like his heart isn't quite in it. I know he's very good at trotting out what he's told to say, and he's an excellent, you know, kind of candidate for giving a speech and looking like he's remembered the lines. But there never appears to be much heart in it, Michael. That's what people feel, that maybe his plans for his future after politics is more important than how he feels for the British public right now.
Well, I think Rishi Sunak is a technocrat.
Totally.
There's nothing wrong with being a technocrat, but you've got to have vision too.
Well, you've got to have humanity.
And you've got to have humanity, that's right. You know, I know that one friend of mine who is very, very senior in the Conservative Party finds it very difficult to make contact with Rishi Sunak. And I remember Boris Johnson, when he was Prime Minister, telling me, Michael, he shouldn't feel so bad about it. I live next door to him at number 10 and he won't return my phone calls either. You know, Rishi...
Remote. He feels remote to his politicians and his public?
Well, to some politicians. And this is what Rishi has to recognise. It's no good just being a technocrat. We've got AI now. We've got all these chatbots coming along. We don't need another one. We need someone with vision. Now, as I say, he's produced visionary ideas in his speeches, but that's not enough. That vision has to be translated into action.
Yeah.
And I think that's what people want to see. Now, that's one of the reasons why people supported Boris, because you could say Boris is the complete opposite of a technocrat. But by God, Boris has vision, and that's what people found so attractive.
I can't have you here without asking you very briefly for two stories. One we were discussing just earlier about the fact that MPs who lose their seats should get £100,000 payoff and a medal for their services. You're on that committee, Michael.
I am.
What's the backstory to that? What's the truth?
The backstory is that MPs don't actually get what other people get working in the public sector and the private sector, which is proper redundancy payments. Now, if an MP leaves, he's not going to get or she is not going to get £100,000. Depends how long they've worked there and all the rest of it. But at the moment, they only get a few £1,000. And let's be honest, some MPs lose their seats, not because they were bad MPs, but because the national swing sweeps them away with all the rest of it. So you take a risk becoming an MP, and you know you make an informed choice if you want to take that career, as I did when I sold my business. But it's not fair, I think, that MPs who can be swept away like that get far less than people who work in the civil service, or indeed for companies like John Lewis. You know, they're all entitled to fairness. And the argument goes, actually, you know what, MPs are treated particularly badly at the moment.
OK. And on the other issue...
Not that I think, by the way, it's going to get much sympathy with your viewers.
It's not going to get much sympathy. It really isn't. My inbox is telling me it isn't getting much sympathy. And the other news story of the day that I want your take on is the Synod, who are the Christian Church, who are debating at the moment whether we should have same-sex marriage blessed by the Church. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I live in a cathedral city, Lichfield, with a beautiful cathedral. The Dean has just retired. So I think I can say that the Dean has said to me privately, but not so privately now, because I'm going to tell you, that he would, like a flash, perform equal weddings, equal marriage, whatever you want to call it. And it's only the Synod holding him back. And I've met so many other vicars who feel that way too, because they say love is love. And if we are created in the image of God, I'm getting quite theological now, if we're created in the image of God and God makes some people, it's not a choice that one makes, oh, I'm going to be gay, or I'm going to be straight. It doesn't work like, or bi, which I am, bisexual. It's not all about that. It's, you know, you're made that way from the moment you are born.
And your father was a very famous rabbi scholar, and you've been brought up in the Jewish faith. What is the situation?
Well, I'm not religious. I mean, I'm not... I haven't been to synagogue in about 20 years, and I go to Evensong at Lichfield Cathedral.
Don't worry, I won't judge. But what is the situation in the Jewish faith?
Well, as I understand,
same-sex marriage?
Well, there are various sects, like in the Anglican Church. Well, you know, there's different sects in Christianity. But as I understand it, and I'll probably now get told off by various people who say this isn't the case, but as I understand it, if you're in the liberal synagogue or reformed synagogue, which are two of the main sects in the UK, you can have a gay marriage.
Right.
I think it's more difficult if you're Orthodox.
Yes.
Not sure. But, you know, every synagogue, it's organised a bit like Methodism, in the sense there isn't some great council above which is going to tell a synagogue off. And I think if an Orthodox rabbi chose to do it, then he could do it. Depends how they interpret.
So you think the Christian church needs to drag itself into the 21st century?
The problem is that the Anglican Communion is not just the UK, US, Canada, Australia and New Zealand, who I would call liberal, forward-thinking people. Western democracies. They include Africa, Malaysia, where there are pressures because there's strong Muslim communities there as well. And for whatever reason, they're against it. And you know what? I would say to the Archbishop of Canterbury, the Anglican Communion should be quality, not quantity. And if you want to be relevant in the 21st century, the Anglican community may have to split. If that means not just gay marriage, other issues too. And the Anglican Church is being held back with 18th century views simply because we can't take along areas which are not Western democracies and which are actually quite, what's the word for it? Very, very...
I'm going to let you finish this sentence.
Well, very, very unforward-looking, shall we say, and that's not going to be the future of the church in this country. And there I am, a nice Jewish boy, not that, as I say, I'm practising Jewish at all, but telling what the Anglican Church should do. Stand by for loads of horrible emails now on GBViews at GBnews about what I've just said.
You know what, Michael? Emma Webb was talking about the fact that a lot of politicians are put off by going into politics because they're not allowed to express their opinion, and I love the fact that you do. So thank you so much for joining us. Right, now, coming up, the Attorney General's office is going to review the sentence for David Carrick after receiving numerous complaints of it being too lenient. I'm going to be speaking to a former Met Police superintendent after this quick break. See you in 2. We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank,
fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store? You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel. Welcome back to GB News with me, Bev Turner. We are here for about another 20 minutes or so because it's PMQs today. Now, the prison sentence handed to rapist police officer David Carrick is being reviewed by the Attorney General after being inundated with multiple requests that it was too lenient. The disgraced former Met police officer was jailed for at least 30 years yesterday after being handed 36 life sentences for rape and sexual attacks. Well, joining me now is the former detective chief superintendent of the Met Police, Kevin Hurley. Good morning, Kevin. Thank you very much for joining me this morning. Can I just have your reflections on this really shocking case as a former police officer?
Well, yeah, the guy's an absolute monster. Been doing it for years. There are many people who use the internet to predate on people of either sex, depending on their proclivity. It's quite dreadful that someone who works in the police service does that, but people are as they are. The tragedy of this is that although there were various indicators along the way, the odd domestic violence allegation or the odd harassment allegation, because they were across different forces, Hampshire, the Met, Hertfordshire, and each one taken on their own, got minimal or limited investigation, as is the norm, sadly, in these cases. It was never linked up. And that's really because the government have failed to invest in a completely networked and linked intelligence system for the country, despite being asked by senior police chiefs to fund that. So the main problem with this were two issues. One, the guy is a monstrous predator who exploited the internet. And the other one is we should not be surprised if things like this slip through the net through lack of linked databases. Jimmy Savile is another classic example of that kind of failure, a guy who was offending all over the country, but because the systems weren't in place, it was never fixed. And this should have been fixed, actually, after the Yorkshire Ripper, when this breakdown in links between police forces was first identified, and it's never been fixed, and it still hasn't been. So, for example, Surrey Police's criminal intelligence system, which neighbours on the Metropolitan Police, cannot talk to each other. The crime recording systems between Surrey Police and the Met Police still can't talk to each other. Bottom line, sentence, well, he's got a really massive sentence, 26 life sentences with a minimum recommendation of 30 years and 8 months. Now, interestingly enough, despite all the political hoo-ha and everyone complaining, judges are constrained by the Sentencing Council on what they can actually award. And the top end for a rape sentence is life with a maximum recommendation of 19 years. So this judge has really gone out on a limb, sentencing as she has done, quite rightly, because it's a shocking and dreadful case. And the public demand, and quite rightly the survivors of this, demand a significant sentence.
OK. All right. Thank you very much, Kevin. Kevin Hurley there, former Detective Chief Superintendent at the Met, summing it up really well, I think. Now, after the break, do we confuse toxic masculinity with aggression? I'm going to be discussing that with my panel after the news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Bev, thank you. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. The President of Ukraine is in the UK. It's his first visit to the country since the start of Russia's invasion. Volodymyr Zelensky has been greeted by Prime Minister Rishi Sunak as well. He's going to be making an address in Parliament today. King Charles is also set to hold an audience with President Zelensky. It says Mr. Sunak announces a stepping up of aid to the country, including plans to train Ukrainian pilots. He says the president's visit is a testament to the unbreakable friendship between the two countries. Governments and organisations around the world are offering support to Turkey and Syria after devastating earthquakes have killed more than 11,000 people. 3 British nationals are still missing following the disaster. A 7.8 magnitude earthquake hit on Monday morning, with a second major quake a few hours later. The government has pledged support to Turkey's president, who's been visiting one of the affected areas. A state of emergency has been declared for 3 months in the 10 worst affected cities. The 77-strong British search and rescue team are currently assisting the country. An independent school where a head teacher was found dead with her family will reportedly stay closed until after half-term. It's while Surrey police continue their investigation into a homicide. The bodies of Emma Patterson, her husband George and their daughter Letty were found in the grounds of Epsom College on Sunday. The force has said Mr. Patterson has been in contact with police. We're going to take you live to President Zelensky at number 10. These are live pictures of Rishi Sunak and President Zelensky entering number 10 to hold talks today as the Prime Minister focuses on stepping up military aid in the war-torn country, and we'll bring you more on that as we get it. There is going to be a audience with King Charles today. He holds that audience with Zelensky, and we'll bring you that as we get it. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News.
It is 11:33. This is Bev Turner Day on GB News. We've just seen Zelensky go up the red carpet into 10 Downing Street to have, lunch? 11s, Stephen Pound, with Rishi Sunak. How significant is that today?
Well, it's a great distraction for Rishi Sunak today, I have to say, when he's got, Dominic Raab and he's got, Lee Anderson, all these business things going on about him. I just find it extraordinary. I used to find it amazing when, in the middle of the last war, Churchill could fly to Canada and back. I mean, I've flown out of Boryspil Airport, in Kyiv a few times, but not in a war zone. It just seems amazing that we can fly in and fly out of there in the war zone at the present time. But symbolically, it is important. I mean, possibly Zelensky's here because he's fed up of bumping into Boris Johnson in Kyiv, because he does seem to spend a lot of time there.
It definitely looked a little, Emma Webb, I don't know whether you agree with me, that Rishi Sunak enthusiastically greeting Zelensky on the tarmac, he's always got Boris Johnson slightly in his periphery, hasn't he? Look, I'm mates with him as well. I'm more mates than you, Boris. Am I too cynical?
No, that's exactly what I thought. If you think about
there we go, look at them, they're practically kissing.
If you think about the optics of it, Rishi needs to show that he is the big boss now, and whether or not, I'm assuming Downing Street knew that Boris was going to go and have this meeting with Zelensky in Ukraine. Whether they did or they didn't, of course, Rishi is going to have to do something similar. And the only way that you can really warm up that is by having Zelensky come to your home and actually be here on British soil. So I think that Rishi is obviously trying to send a particular message here. He's sending a message about the UK, its role in the world. He's sending a message about his relationship with Zelensky. And importantly, I think showing the continuity of the relationship within the Conservative Party, within the government with Zelensky, so that it's clear that it's not just a good relationship that he has with one person, Boris Johnson, that this is something that is ongoing and against the backdrop of what's been going on with German tanks and so on, to show that we really are at the forefront of this.
Do people want us to be at the forefront of this, Stephen?
I think by and large they do, because at the moment it hasn't impacted too massively on us. At the moment it's perceived as there's an existential threat against a European country, and I think people naturally, in this country, we have a tradition of standing up for people who get invaded. I think that's something to be proud of. I think if
it just feels like everyone's just given up on any sort of diplomatic resolution. We had Zelensky saying, I won't sit down with Putin and come to any sort of peace arrangement. Well, can you try, please? Because it's costing us about £5 billion so far, hasn't it?
We've tried that. I mean, we couldn't have done that with Galtieri over the Falklands. There's no talking to, and certainly we couldn't have done it with Hitler in 1939. I don't want to go too much back into the past, but I think there comes a time when you realise you cannot negotiate with dictators. You cannot negotiate with psychopaths. And I think Putin is not someone you can negotiate with.
But Erdogan, I mean, you know what? Turkish president has got other issues to deal with at the moment, let's face it. But he did a pretty good job of brokering some sort of negotiation at the start of this, trying to get at least a message across to the Ukrainians of specifically what it was that Russia wanted. Emma, are you disillusioned like I am at the idea that nobody has any ambition, apparently, to sort this out without bombing each other?
I think the problem is, obviously, there have been tiny steps in the direction of escalation, but the international community has been very careful not to escalate things and not to poke the Russian bear, as it were. But, you know, I think the problem is that it's difficult for the international community and international leaders, I imagine, to tell Zelensky that he would have to compromise on any territory in Ukraine, because for him this, and also in geopolitical terms, conceding any amount of territory sends a message. It sends a message to Russia, but importantly, you have to see it in the broader context. It also sends a message to China, and so whatever happens, whatever decision is taken, whether it is militarily or diplomatic, we have to ensure that we're sending the right message to countries like China, which we've just seen them sending these spy balloons over Latin America and the United States. There's a risk of international escalation as well that has to be considered. So obviously it's something that needs to be carefully balanced. But when you're talking about somebody like Vladimir Putin or you're talking about Xi Jinping, these are strong men who only understand strength. They don't understand softly or respect that at all. And so there's an element of a psychological game involved here as well. And that makes the whole situation, I think, a lot more complicated.
But I think the point is that it will be watched with great interest and concern in Moldova and in Taiwan. But if you actually have a look at the sphere of Russian influence in that area, I mean, Armenia, a country I know very well indeed, was actually talking about joining the European Union. Now they're in the Russian customs union because they've been forced into it. I think people think we've actually let Crimea go, we've let a whole range of countries. Georgia, for example, was occupied. You know, this is where we stop.
And when you say we're looking at the images here, I'm sorry, but Zelensky can buy another outfit which is not combat fatigues. He's going to see the Prime Minister. Why is he wearing his green cargo pants and his green sweatshirt? That, for me, is just odd and inappropriate.
Politics is optics. International politics
yes, but
is optics.
He's not actually in a war zone right now. Why can't he put a suit and tie on?
Well, Churchill used to wear a boiler suit all the time when he was walking around London during the Blitz.
He used to wear a boiler suit.
It's actually called a siren suit. It was like a zip-up suit.
But we were being bombed at that point.
Yes, we were. Good spot.
We're not being. You know, he's at no risk of getting his suit dirty in Downing Street.
Well, there are parts of London.
It's not his image, is it? To be fair on Zelensky, it's not his image. I think people would be confused to see him in a suit, wouldn't they?
But we shouldn't be, though, should we? Because it really plays into this idea that he's acting a role and that he doesn't want this to end and that this is working somehow in the favour of Ukraine and their bigger ambition to be part of NATO and be part of EU. And if he's constantly casting himself as the victim, and don't get me wrong, the people, the civilians whose lives have been trashed and lost in this war is appalling. But we have to draw a distinction between them and Zelensky rocking up dressed like he's on a war zone going to 10 Downing Street for lunch.
To clarify my point, though, I think that Zelensky has a purpose when it comes to any of his meetings with any international leaders, and particularly in front of the 10 Downing Street door, that is a photo op. And the message that he wants to send to the public as well as to the international community and world leaders is that Ukraine is in a state of crisis, it's under imminent threat. And so if he turns up in his military fatigues, I presume that's the thinking.
But him and his wife did a front magazine cover for like Tatler recently, and he was still in his green outfit. They were in a photo studio. You're telling me he hasn't got a wardrobe department that can't give him a suit?
What would have been truly weird would be, of course, if Rishi Sunak had actually dressed down to match him. I mean, could you imagine that?
But they're about the same size, aren't they? They could swap clothes, the two of them. But it is extraordinary, and I just think I'd love to know what you think at home. GBviews at gbnews.uk. what does this say to you? Is it, as I was discussing just earlier with Michael Fabricant, is it continuing to whet your appetite for increased and continued funding of the war from taxpayers' money? Because I do think that is an issue. And I'm not entirely sure that the public are currently have Ukraine in their hearts, Emma, like we did at the beginning.
No, I think people are tired of it, as we always do, particularly when you have wall-to-wall coverage on any given topic. People get exhausted.
Yeah. We're seeing images here. These were only moments ago inside Downing Street, in front of the beautiful mantelpiece within Downing Street. We've got the Union Jack on one side and the Ukrainian flag on the other. Rishi Sunak in his shirt and tie and his usual navy blue suit, and Zelensky in his green sweatshirt and his green combat pants and his necklace round his neck, just chatting in front of the assembled press and the photographers. We don't know what they're saying at this particular point, but I think we understand, Stephen, that Zelensky is going to make a statement in the House of Commons at some point today.
Well, he's actually going to address both houses in Westminster Hall in the same way that Aung San Suu Kyi did, and Pope Benedict and Bill Clinton and, you know, many people have done. What he will be looking for is two things. One is materiel, because he's already got the Challenger tanks. We talk about the Leopard tanks. The Challenger is a very good piece of kit. Those guys, he's now actually looking for combat aircraft as well. And I think that the point that Emma made, actually very presciently, I think, about escalation, is something that we should be aware of, because if we start committing more and more... So he'll be looking for that. He'll also be looking for financial support, particularly on the periphery of Ukraine at the present time, where people are suffering terribly.
Yeah. He's obviously zoomed in to Parliament before, Emma. He made a statement on screen to Parliament. How significant is it that he's doing this in person?
It's a very different thing, I think, to meet with people face to face and to address people physically with the symbolism of Westminster Hall, as you were saying, or the people who have come before him and made similar addresses to both houses. It's politically significant for him. It's historically significant. And like I said, you know, Zelensky has a purpose in his diplomatic relations. He's trying to get more intervention in Ukraine. He's trying to get more kit. He's trying to get more support financially and otherwise militarily. And to some degree, Zelensky has not an interest in escalation, but he has more of an interest in pushing the boundaries, because he wants to ensure that Ukraine gets all of its territory back and doesn't make any compromises with Russia. And so I think you have to look at this in the context of Ukraine's own strategy. And it's also symbolic, not just in relation to the UK, but also in relation to the rest of Europe, because, as I say, Britain has taken the lead on this. And so by addressing parliamentarians and having meetings, as he will obviously be doing, with people in person, that sends a message to other European leaders that they need to get themselves sorted out in terms of supporting what Zelensky is asking for. So whether you agree with what he wants or not, I think that's... For him, that will be the purpose of this trip.
We've got some more images. Oh, it's just him walking out of the room. I don't know where he was going.
In front of the Robert
walked out the door. I
think we should actually be giving credit to Poland as well. I think Britain, you know, the United Kingdom, but the Poles have taken an enormous number of people, and also because don't forget that Lvov was part of Poland until the last war. So there's a very close thing. When you go to Ukraine, I find quite extra. If you drive across the country from east to west, they speak Russian first of all, then Ukrainian, but then Polish. So I think the future of Ukraine as an entity as it presently is has not entirely been decided yet. I think if there was a plebiscite in parts of the Donbass region around Donetsk, maybe that there would be a pro-Russian minority there.
We're talking about we're talking about the psychology of Putin, though, and effectively how to play him. Is this not quite antagonistic? If he's warming up his nuclear weapons over there, is it not quite antagonistic to have Zelensky here? I think whatever we do is going to be seen as antagonistic, whatever we do. I mean, it's the end game, it's a difficult thing. The Stauffenberg plot was the time. Do you remember when the German generals tried to kill Hitler because he just went too far? And Klaus von Stauffenberg had a briefcase full of gelignite under the desk. Right. I mean, a lot of people are saying that within the Kremlin at the moment, within the military high command, there is a feeling of absolute repulsion. There is no end game. All there is now is a permanent winter war that's going to go on there. Oh, that's what it feels like. It's going to go on forever. Right, Emma Webb, Stephen Pound, brilliant as usual. Thank you so much, guys. We've come to the end of the show. It's flown by. Coming up next is GB News Live with Mark Longhurst. I'm Bev Turner. I'll see you tomorrow morning at 10.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office. Fog clearing across central and southern parts of the UK during the rest of the morning, and then dry for many into the afternoon, but it will turn increasingly wet and windy in the north. Now, you can see the contrast across the UK. High pressure close to the south, light winds and clear skies, allowing frost and fog to form by dawn this morning, but a weather front moving into northwest Scotland, bringing strengthening winds, gales, 65 to 75 mile per hour gusts for the Outer Hebrides, and some heavy rain for a time during the afternoon. As that's pushing south, it will push cloud into northern England, West Wales as well as Cornwall, but to the southeast, actually plenty of sunshine once the fog lifts, and temperatures fairly widely across the UK reaching 8 to 10 Celsius. Now the front across Scotland pushes south through the evening, and it will fall as snow over the higher ground as it clears. Then wintry showers follow for northern Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland as well, snow and hail in places mainly over the hills. The front weakens though as it pushes south. It will prevent a frost in the far south with some drizzle to begin things on Thursday. Otherwise, for North Wales, Northern England, Southern Scotland, frosty conditions and bright skies. But for Northern Ireland as well as for much of the rest of Scotland, we've got those showers continuing to pile in. A gusty wind as well for the far north. The rain and the drizzle and the low cloud clears quite quickly during the morning in the south, and then sunny skies once again, 8 to 10 Celsius across much of England and Wales. Feeling colder though for Scotland and Northern Ireland with those blustery showers.